Hello and welcome. You're watching Grace Power. My name is Mohammed Saleh. And on the show today, Donald Trump has unleashed his tariff war on the world. But the question is this: what impact will it have on the American economy and indeed the global financial system? And in India, the contentious Waqf amendment bill that proposes sweeping changes in the management of the Waqf lands has been tabled in the upper house of the parliament. But let's, of course, start with this big story from the United States. It's been 18 hours since the American President Donald Trump declared a tariff war on the rest of the world. And the announcement has got the global leaders scrambling. Markets have turned very volatile and several industries are bracing for the impact of these Trump tariffs.
Well, Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore.
All right, Liberation Day. That is how Donald Trump is, of course, describing, because these tariffs were announced on the Liberation Day. Now, Washington has announced reciprocal tariffs on 185 countries. Now, the Trump administration has, in fact, implemented the highest rates on Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Iraq, Myanmar, and many other nations. Now, the highest tariff rate is 50%. The White House, in fact, has announced that the United States will implement a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. So the biggest nations have, in fact, reacted to the tariff announcement. India's government has released a statement saying that the Commerce Ministry in India is very carefully examining the implications of these announcements. Now, the communique further reads that the government of India is taking feedback from the Indian industries and also studying for any opportunities. Now, let's in fact talk about what's happening in Europe as well. Now, firstly, listen to how Asian and other nations have reacted to these Trump announcements.
As I said before, there are no winners in a trade or tariff war. Protectionism has no exit ramp. What the US needs to do now is correct its wrong practices and resolve economic and trade differences with other countries, including China, through fair, respectful and reciprocal consultations.
We had been requesting the U.S. government to review its unilateral tariff measures at various levels, and we are extremely disappointed and regret that such measures have been implemented nonetheless.
By closely analyzing the main contents and impact of the U.S. mutual tariff measures, we will actively pursue negotiations with the U.S. to minimize damage to companies while preparing emergency support measures for industries affected by the U.S. tariff imposition as soon as possible.
Discussed this in detail this morning. We've been preparing for a while and have set up a working team. There is no need to worry, as we have prepared several steps for it.
Now, Donald Trump claims that these tariffs will actually raise revenue, and also he claims create jobs for the Americans in the United States. But economists widely predict that this will actually result in price rise and will stall global growth. All right, now to give us more details on this, we're joined in this broadcast by our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, who's in fact joining us live from New York. Susan, this, of course, is the big day, the day that Donald Trump had been promising all along. He's now imposed these retaliatory tariffs. He claims that these tariffs will create jobs and bring in revenue for the people in America. But a lot of economists are in fact pointing out that these tariffs will result in inflation and possibly even in the contraction of the economy. What are you picking up on your end?
Right. Yeah. I mean, in the short term, it will have short-term effects. But in the long term, even those analysts who are skeptical say that it will ultimately benefit the United States. But let's talk about what the American people are saying. Their recent polls show that President Trump's approval rating, I mean, they were very high. They were near 50%. That's fallen down to 43%. It's a drop, but again, because he was so popular, it's not that big of a significant drop. But they're concerned that President Trump is focusing too much on tariffs in these polls when they're asked, rather than bringing prices down, because the economy, of course, was the thing that he ran on. And then you have the political implications. Again, these are all short-term implications that we're talking about. Long-term, many believe that it's going to be a success if it gets that way. The Senate passed a resolution to block the proposed tariffs against Canada and Canadian imports. So you see that, some Republicans joined the Democrats for this resolution to be passed. Again, we'll have to wait and see until April 9th, I believe, is the deadline for countries to respond to President Trump's tariffs. They are going to go into effect starting April 5th. But I think until April 9th, we're going to sort of see predictions as opposed to, a clear-cut outcome of what's going to happen with these tariffs.
All right, will be interesting to see as to how it plays out. Thank you very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us from New York then. Let's now get you as to what the reaction in Europe has been. Europe has reacted pretty strongly to Donald Trump's reciprocal tariff measures. Remember, the United States and Europe see themselves as close allies. But this is what they are confronted with now. Now, throughout the day, the leaders have made a series of statements, but the underlying sentiment is pretty clear. Europe is willing to negotiate with Donald Trump on the tariff rates.
We must act in the national interest. A trade war is in nobody's interest, in my view. But of course, we have to protect ourselves, and that's why we're keeping all options on the table.
We have always been ready to negotiate with the United States to remove the remaining barriers to transatlantic trade. At the same time, we are prepared to respond.
The government of Spain will mobilize 14.1 billion euro, 1566 billion, of which 7.4 billion euros are new financing and commercial resources. We will also make use of the 6.7 billion euro from existing instruments to respond to this trade war that no one, except one person, wants.
Germany and Europe continue to stand for free trade. We are focusing on cooperation, not confrontation, and we will defend our interests. Europe will respond to the U.S. decision in a united, strong, and appropriate manner.
This decision is a catastrophe for the economic world, a major difficulty for Europe. And I believe it is also a catastrophe for the United States and U.S. citizens.
After being pushed into a corner over unequal defense expenditure, the United States has now put fresh pressure on the European nations with Wednesday's tariff announcement. Meetings are now being held across the region to discuss a feasible response to the trade war. The foreign ministers of the European Union held a meeting in Warsaw, Poland. Just minutes ago, a meeting of the NATO members and nations also began in Brussels. In France, President Emmanuel Macron will meet with the representatives of the country's industries that are impacted by Donald Trump's tariff announcements. Now, Macron and other leaders of the government are mulling on a response to America's trade war. An announcement is expected in the coming days. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of how the European leaders are, of course, responding to this new tariff war that is upon them, we're joined in this broadcast by our correspondent Ross Cullen, who's joining us live from Brussels. Ross, firstly, give us a sense of what the mood is like, within the European capitals. This is not a war that the European capitals are willing to fight. A lot of them are saying that they want to negotiate, but they can also push back. What's the mood like there, and what sort of a pushback can we expect from the Europeans?
Well, you mentioned in the introduction that meeting that Emmanuel Macron is convening in Paris. Well, that has just got underway, and we've got some preliminary remarks from the French president. He has said that the decision by Donald Trump to impose these sweeping tariffs is, quote, brutal and baseless. So very strong words from the French president. Earlier we had strong words from the French Prime Minister, François Bayrou. He was saying that the decision to impose these tariffs was a catastrophe for the world economy. In terms of the remarks from the European Union, the president of the European Commission, the overall head of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, she said that the tariffs are a major blow to the world economy. She said she deeply regretted this choice by President Trump. The global economy will massively suffer. The consequences will be dire for millions of people around the world, she said. And there's also been a news conference just a couple of hours ago here in Brussels by the International Trade Committee representative of the European Parliament. He has said that this is a mess, quite simply. It's unfair practices in the United States. He said President Trump called it Liberation Day. Well, I call it Inflation Day, because it is totally clear that this decision will raise prices in the United States and in the European Union. They do have some responses. He said that we have a packed toolbox with instruments that we are ready to use, such as anti-coercion instruments, such as enforcement regulations, such as retaliatory countermeasures that could be targeting many billions of dollars worth of US goods. However, the EU is not going to deploy those just yet. It wants to have more talks with its trade representatives. It wants to have more talks with Washington. We know that there are permanent engagements taking place, permanent conversations between the EU and Washington to try to come to a negotiated solution. That is what they prefer, to have talks win the day and not have these tariffs imposed.
Interesting. We'll have to see as to how these calibrated measures, of course, unfold. Thank you very much, Ross Cullen, for joining us from Brussels there. Now, Elon Musk and the White House are calling reports that he's stepping down as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency to be fake news. This after Politico reported that President Donald Trump had told his inner circle that Elon Musk will step down in the coming weeks from his current role as the governing partner and will have a more diluted role moving forward. Now, later on Wednesday, Elon Musk in fact called the report fake news. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt tweeted, Elon Musk and President Trump have both publicly stated that Elon will depart from public service as a special government employee when his incredible work at Doge is complete. Notably, the report came on a day when shares of Elon Musk-led Tesla saw a sharp drop of 2% in early trading. But immediately after the report appeared on Wednesday, Tesla shares rose by nearly 5%. The Tesla shares price was up by 4.21% at $279.76. Tesla sales had in fact fallen 13% in the first 3 months of the year, indicating that the company is in fact failing to attract enough buyers, while its stock price was initially falling more than 6%. The market reversals apart, Elon Musk is also battling some rising public disapproval of his government work. According to a Market University Law School poll, as many as about 58% disapproved of Elon Musk's handling of the Department of Government Efficiency, and only 41% of the adults surveyed approved of his work. Now, as for the man himself, 60% now, believe it or not, 60% now have an unfavorable opinion of Elon Musk, compared to 38% who still happen to approve of him. Interestingly, Donald Trump's approval ratings are only slightly better than Elon Musk. 46% approved of his job performance, while 54% are now disapproving his performance. The poll conducted from the 17th March till the 27th surveyed as many as about 1,000 adults across the country.
Do you think you need to have a conversation with him?
After weeks of back and forth, South Africa's national budget has finally been passed by a very slim majority of just about 10 votes. Now, this has once again exposed the cracks in the government of National Unity Partners. The budget that was initially meant to be presented in February was postponed at the last minute, before a revised version was tabled last month. Now, its most contentious elements include proposals to raise a value-added tax and not adjust personal income tax brackets for inflation. Now, DA, which is the ANC's largest coalition partner, rejected the VAT increase, and also the party had negotiated for weeks with ANC to try to agree to pass the budget together, but it had failed to do so. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa's party had to rely on smaller parties to vote for the critical measure.
So it cannot be the case in our estimation that the minister does not have confidence that he'll get the votes in Parliament. He then goes ahead and announces a VAT increase which is set to take effect on the 1st of May. And no bill has moved through Parliament to support that VAT increase. We're challenging that concept. We're saying it's unconstitutional, and that's why we're here today.
Now, in an hours-long vote, the DA and the opposition parties, the MK and the EFF, rejected a 0.5% VAT increase this year and a further 0.5% next year, which the National Treasury says is needed to fill a $3.3 billion fiscal hole created partly by US President Donald Trump's withdrawal of funding for HIV/AIDS programs. Now, several opposition parties have argued that an increase in the value-added tax, which they said was still in the paperwork, will adversely affect the poor. And our correspondent Calden Ong has been tracking the story very closely for us and has sent us this report from Johannesburg. Let's listen in.
After weeks of political wrangling, South Africa's parliament on Wednesday finally passed a contentious budget vote. However, it did not get full support of its coalition partners, putting its relationship in jeopardy. DA, the largest GNU partner, opposition parties like the Umkhonto Wesizwe and the Economic Freedom Fighters rejected the budget. The Democratic Alliance has said the party will file papers in the Western Cape High Court to challenge Parliament's passing of the 2025-2026 national budget. Ordinary South Africans are also divided. While many say the government does not care for its people, some say this VAT increase is necessary for the country to keep moving in the right direction. Some are even asking if this long-standing deadlock between the ANC and DA will be the end of the road for GNU partners. Only time will tell. This is Calden Ong from Johannesburg, South Africa for WION World is One.
All right, let's now give you some news from India, where the contentious Waqf amendment bill that proposes some sweeping changes in the management of the land that's set aside for use for the Muslim community was tabled by the upper house of the parliament today. The lower house of the parliament, the Lok Sabha member, had already passed the bill yesterday.
Of the Waqf Amendment Bill 2025 and the Mussalman Waqf Repeal Bill 2025 as passed by Lok Sabha.
The Union Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiran Rijiju tabled the bill amidst uproar by the opposition in the Rajya Sabha, amid some pretty noisy scenes similar to what was witnessed in the Lok Sabha yesterday. The minister countered the opposition's charge that the bill is actually anti-minority and is unconstitutional. The disruption staged by the opposition provoked an angry reaction from the Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who stood up and reprimanded the MPs.
Banging the chair. Stop banging the table. Stop banging the table, Derek. Stop banging the table. So the chair called and then the honorable member.
Of the Waqf Amendment Bill 2020.
Now, Kiran Rijiju said the quote-unquote inclusive legislation aims to empower Muslim women and also protect the rights of all Muslim sects. He also assured that there was no question of interference by non-Muslims in the bill.
5 मार्च को यानी कि 25 दिन पहले इलेक्शन एकदम नोटिफाई होकर के कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट लगने ही वाला है, तब फानन में उस समय के यूपीए सरकार ने देश की राजधानी दिल्ली के अंदर में सबसे प्राइम प्रॉपर्टी 123 प्राइम प्रॉपर्टी को डी नोटिफाई करके दिल्ली वक्फ बोर्ड को सौंप दिया है.
However, the opposition persisted in its attack, calling the bill to be an attack on the minorities and a very legally flawed legislation.
इस एक्ट को लेके आके कम्युनल पोलराइजेशन करने का काम कर रहे हैं. आप कह रहे हैं कि हम अपील कर रहे हैं, आप पोलराइज करना चाह रहे हैं. पूरे देश को, पूरी दुनिया को पता है पोलराइजेशन देश में होता है तो किसका फायदा होता है करके. कौन पोलराइज करता है, कौन धर्म की राजनीति करता है, कौन किसी एक कम्युनिटी को विलन बना के उसके खिलाफ में एक नैरेटिव बिल्डअप करने का काम करता है. और ये पूरी बिल मैं दावे के साथ कह सकता हूं और पूरे में तत्व के साथ, लॉजिक के साथ यहां पे अपनी बात रखूंगा, ये बिल टोटली फॉल्सिटी पे है. ये मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन कैंपेन पे है, एक नैरेटिव बिल्डअप करने की पिछले 4 महीने से 6 महीने से कोशिश की गई है।
288 विपक्ष में 232 प्रस्ताव स्वीकृत हुआ और विधेयक यथा संशोधित पारित हुआ।
Now, similar scenes had been witnessed on Wednesday in the Lok Sabha that saw a marathon 12-hour-long debate before the contentious bill was passed with 288 MPs in favour and 232 voting against it.
और विधेयक यथा संशोधित पारित हुआ। पक्ष में
Let's now get you some updates from Turkey, which has witnessed a day of solidarity and protest with a nationwide no-spending day and a shutdown of commercial establishments just days after the arrest of the Istanbul mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. Now, the general boycott was called by Turkey's main opposition party, the Republican People's Party. The call has prompted widespread closures of shops, coffee stores and restaurants. In Istanbul on Wednesday, as mark of solidarity, critics claimed that the mayor's arrest was a politicized and anti-democratic attempt to hurt the opposition's electoral prospects.
Boycott is a right call. It is a late decision. Boycott is something that needs to be done. People need to show their reaction. If they continues this way, the country is getting worse. The boycott action that Mr. Özgür Özel started is a very correct thing. As shopkeepers, we join this. All the shopkeepers in this area are joining it as well.
The Turkish government has denounced the opposition call for mass commercial boycott that sparked nationwide protests. It is describing the boycott call as an economic sabotage attempt.
I am completely against the boycott decision. It is national income. Excuse me. There is no sense in boycotting some people to cover up some people's thievery. Let them be acquitted and come rule the country. That is what I am saying.
Now, in the Turkish capital Ankara, tables at the usually busy cafes were empty and many shops reported a significant drop in customers.
I am 56 years old, and I think for the first time Turkey has become one. Actions that can create a big impact are being taken. In my opinion, the government really needs to pull itself together. They need to turn their faces to the citizens.
Now, hundreds of Turkish opposition supporters gathered at a park in Ankara to share the pastries and tea as part of a day of spending.
I think it's something that needs to be done every week. This is the only way we can make our voices heard because we're still ignored. Interestingly, we're ignored. But somehow they have to realize that we exist too.
Doctors in Karachi are monitoring the health of the Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari, who's been confirmed to be COVID positive. A series of medical tests have now been conducted amidst reports of some fever and other health issues. The 69-year-old Asif Ali Zardari was admitted to a hospital in Karachi on Wednesday after he complained of ill health.
सर आगे आगे सर जरदारी साहब क्या फैसला देख रहे हैं क्या तो कोई आज के फैसले सबको क्या जो भी होगा खैर होगा जरदारी साहब आप इलेक्शन से पहले कहा करते थे कि नवाज शरीफ हमेशा धोखा देते हैं इस मर्तबा अलायंस थोड़ा पीछे होते जाए भाई.
Now, some reports are also suggesting that he could in fact be taken to Dubai for treatment, though his party, the PPP, has rejected it to be a rumour. The president's personal physician has said that he's been advised complete isolation and a series of tests have been conducted. Now, Zardari taking ill coincides with a much-anticipated show of strength event by the PPP, where he was scheduled to deliver the keynote address. Now, Zardari has suffered from a number of different health ailments in recent years. He tested positive for COVID-19 in July 2022 as well, but had very mild symptoms. In October 2024, he had fractured his leg while disembarking from a plane, which required plastering after treatment. In March 2023, the PPP leader had undergone an eye surgery. There have also been frequent complaints of exhaustion. The latest health bulletin says that President Zardari is still stable and he is recuperating pretty well. At an election campaign event, Australia's Prime Minister had a fall on stage, but the leader quickly recovered with help. The moment was captured on video. Take a look.
Then we'll get some photos with everyone, okay?
Well, Anthony Albanese was still smiling after that fall, and with that, it's also a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
Technology redefines our future. Empower yourself with cutting-edge innovation. Discover, secure, dominate. Turn your assets into powerful tools. Enter the era of tokenization. Token Money Magnet by Kalp Decentra Foundation, the first of its kind. Learn, master, transform with every episode.